Today in our entitled parents, I know you re the owner of Amazon. No, I'm not. You guys have been asking for it. So for today's video, I thought why not tell you all a little. Entitled Parents, story of my own. Yes, this is me, Redditor, writing. What I've got for you is an interesting tale that makes me question everything about my country's education system. Still to this day, I cannot work out how someone as stupid as the lady I'm about to tell you about actually exists. A little background to provide some necessary context. In order to pass your driving test, you must first complete a theory exam before you are allowed to have a go at the practical. The driving test proper. This story takes place at a theory test center in which our Karen was an employee. To set the scene, myself and a friend of mine, Geoff, were both in the process of becoming licensed drivers about a year ago. As a result, we decided to book into the same slot at the same location to hopefully both pass our theory tests. Spoiler alert, we did pass, but as you will see, that is wholly irrelevant for this story. We enter the building, a horrible, run-down establishment in the outskirts of a small town, and we are immediately met by the following. Karen, barking like a Rottweiler. Kids, I barely had time to open the door. For those of you that don't know, you need to hold a provisional license in order to apply for a full driver's license. This is what this Karen was asking for, although both Geoff and I didn't really hear her. She was across the other side of the room, with a voice so raspy it sounded like she had smoke stuck in her lungs. She repeated, I said I'ds. This time we heard her in a hurry to pass them over, a little flummoxed by the current situation. Upon reflection, her manner was perhaps to be expected. The job that she has is an unfulfilling one. Very low pay and exceptionally boring. She basically has to sign in candidates all day before they do their tests. She looked to be in her late 30s and was clearly run down and tired of life. It wouldn't surprise me if I found out she had been working in this test center for the past decade, but that does not excuse what happened next. I passed my id over, and she signed me in without saying a word. Then Geoff handed his over, and she did the same. But before handing it back, she did a double take. Geoff leaned in to take his id, but she suddenly stood up, a little starstruck. Karen, oh my God, it's really you. What on earth are you doing here? Geoff, confused. Doing my theory test. Karen, that is crazy. I would have thought for sure you how to drive by now. You are. Geoff, sorry, am I missing something? I do apologize if we've met before, but I don't believe that I... know you. Karen, laughing. Of course you don't know me. You re far too important for that. Geoff, okay, is this a joke? I'm just here to do my theory test. Please, could you tell who you think I am? Karen, still laughing. Oh, come on. Everyone knows who you are. You're really owner of Amazon. At this point, Geoff and I burst out laughing. This woman was actually serious. She actually thought my mate was Jeff Bezos. Laughing. Are you joking? Look at his id again. The lady looks at Geoff's id again, but her expression remains unchanged. She still looks shell-shocked. Karen, what do you mean? This is incredible. The real Geoff Barnholt, taking a theory test in London. What a coincidence. It was at this point where I realized that this wasn't just a mistake. This woman was actually stupid. Geoff, all right, come on, lady, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not the owner of Amazon. I mean, first of all, his name is Jeff with a G, and mine is Geoff with a G. Secondly, we have entirely different surnames. Mine is Barnholt. The owner of Amazon is called Jeff Bezos, not to mention that I am a 20-year-old kid from the up trying to pass his driving test, whereas Bezos is about 50 years old from America. This is where the story gets weird and things take a turn for the worse. I get it. Everyone makes mistakes and there are lots of cases of mistaken identity. But this, Karen, instead of admitting her error, said this instead. Karen, oh, stop lying. I know exactly who you are, as does everyone else in this room. There were literally two other people, another employee and another candidate. Actually, you know what? Since you're the owner of a huge company, do you happen to have any spare change? You must be like a billionaire or something. The least you could do is give me. I done it. $1,000. Some thousand. We were gobsmacked. Geoff, look, I'm quite clearly not Jeff Bezos, but let me just prove it to you. Geoff begins to open his bag, I presume to get his phone out to look up a picture of Jeff Bezos to show this idiot. But of course Karen finds a way to stop him. Karen, no electronic devices allowed in this building or you will be disqualified. I must say, given that she believed she was speaking to the owner of one of the biggest companies in the world, she was exceptionally rude. Also, she was utterly incorrect with this statement. You aren't allowed your phones during the actual exam, for obvious reasons, but before and afterwards, you can do whatever you like with them. Geoff, all right, I know that's just not true. All I'm doing is getting a picture of the real Jeff Bezos so I can pass my test and get out of here. So Geoff gets his phone out, except it wasn't his phone. It was his tablet. Big mistake. It was an Amazon Fire. Geoff, all right, so I'm just going to look up the real Jeff Bezos. Karen sees his tablet and interrupts him. Sion, I knew it. You are the owner. No wonder you have a fire. Geoff knew at this point he was beaten. He started to protest, but then held his tongue. I think he knew by now that there was no winning. This lady was clearly insane and there was nothing he could do to make her change her mind. I was still absolutely bemused by the whole situation. Bear in mind this was first thing in the morning and I was half asleep. I nearly pinched myself to check I wasn't dreaming, but the pain in my eardrums from the following outburst quickly confirmed that this was, unfortunately, really happening. Karen, you're only lying to me because you don't want to give me any money. At this point, I literally went and sat down. I figured this was probably going to be loud and last a while, and I was done with this lady's stupidity at this point. Geoff, no, for God's sake, just list. Then, all of a sudden, Karen starts to get upset. Karen crying. People like you don't understand. I work 70 hours a week in this heckhole to provide for my daughter. I am a single mom, and my girl is only 7. I barely make enough to buy her meals. Why are the rich always so selfish? Look, I didn't want to say this, but my daughter is severely disabled, and we really need the money. I can't keep looking after her all by myself with my current financial situation. We need to take her to a hospice, and the least you could do is give me some cash to enable us to do so. What is it to you anyway? It would literally save her life. Geoff, I am genuinely so sorry to hear that, and I wish I could help, but please believe me, I am not who you think I am. I go back over to the desk to help comfort the lady and support my friend. Me. Look, you have to believe him. If he had any money to help you out, he would be. We are just 20-year-olds looking to pass our tests. I am so sorry to hear about your daughter, and I wish you the best of luck with dealing with her disability. Actually, I am hoping to run the London Marathon next year, and I would love to raise some money for a charity. What disability does your daughter have, and which charity would be the optimal one to support? At this point, Karen storms out of the room crying. Her colleague, an elderly gentleman who had so far been anonymous, spoke up for the first time. Colleague, take no notice of her, lads. It's not worth it. I've dealt with this ever since I started working here a year or so ago. Yes, she does have a daughter, but other than that, everything she has just told you is untrue. She isn't disabled. She isn't a single mother, and she really doesn't need the money. Now let me sign you both in so you can sit your tests. Shocked, we handed our IDs to this kind man, sat our tests, and got the heck out of there. To be honest, I am quite surprised we both passed. I was certainly not focused during the exam. I'm sure Geoff's mind was all over the place. But we left, and that was it. Never did we hear of this Karen again. What started as a funny case of mistaken identity turned into something rather shocking and deeply troubling. How sad must this lady's life be to lie about her child in order to try and get some money off someone? Soon after this car crash of an event, I realized why she stormed out when I asked her for the best charity to support for my marathon attempt. She had no idea at all and knew she was rumbled. What a disgusting human. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to give the marathon a go this summer, as I dislocated my ankle in April, playing football, which stopped me from being able to train sufficiently. However, this was a blessing in disguise in many ways, as it now gives me the opportunity to ask you guys for any charities you may know that I can raise some money for. Please leave your comments below this post, or in the comments of the video, of some lesser-known charities that do some great work and could do with some help. Thanks. So that's the end of that one. If you have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer them below. This next one is entitled M makes the birth of my son about her tragedy 30 plus years ago. Cell phone. Sorry for any weird formatting. So my mother is a Karen, but also a Kevin, entitled and narcissistic, with absolutely no sense of timing or honestly common sense. A little background on her that is relevant is my mom has been through serious trauma, 2 very abusive relationships with her baby daddies, rape, miscarriages and stillborn, and loss of 3 children. And I fully understand that's not something that is easily gotten over, for lack of a better term. However, my mother is the biggest attention whore on earth and will exaggerate, flat out lie to get any kind of sympathy she can when telling her tragic stories, and believe me, she tells them very often. My mother embellishes a lot, and I know this simply due to having heard these so often that I pick up on the conflicting new details. This in mind, on to the story. I just gave birth to my son 5 weeks ago. He is my second child. During the first 2 days, my son lost 12 of his body weight and had to have an extended stay as we frantically tried to get his weight back up and figure out why he wasn't gaining. 5 weeks later, and his chunky butt is perfectly fine. But during these few days, I was a nervous wreck, and also missing my toddler who was staying with my mother. So on the most hectic day of the hospital stay, my husband had to return to work, and I was having an emotional breakdown. My mother came with my daughter to offer support. I was grateful, but very quickly ended up losing my temper. Enter my mom. She immediately decided to make this room her stomping grounds for attention. The nurses were in my room nearly constantly with my son, taking him in and out of the room, checking on him and me. Every nurse got trapped by mother who would pick up my son and make this huge display of caring on him, kissing him, which she was told many times not to, and generally making an obnoxious fake fuss over him in their presence. When that didn't warrant her enough attention, she changed her strategy. The pediatrician switched my son to a high-calorie formula, and we fit him with a tube and a syringe, and the nursing staff was in the room each feeding to help me. Mom used this to her advantage. She would immediately bring up my brother, who was sick the moment he was born and died a horribly painful death at 15. She brought up how terribly sick he was. How she was told he wasn't going to live, and he was even smaller than this one, gesturing to my son, who then weighed just under 7 pounds. Then she would say how he was so messed up because his father beat me so severely when I was 7 months pregnant that it damaged my baby, and I was on bed rest until he was born. That went to how my biological father raped her and held her hostage in an abusive relationship. She brought up how her babies, my 2 older brothers, were born very prematurely and both died in the hospital. One of them had a tube to feed him too, and both of them failed to thrive, and she had to watch her newborns die. This is not what I want to hear when my seemingly healthy newborn dropped a pound in weight in 2 days and went from breastfeeding like a champ to being fed with a tube, with the hospital staff debating putting a feeding tube in. Whenever the pediatrician or Maya came in to talk to me, check on us, my mother would interrupt to ask some ridiculously stupid question like, so if he has to have a feeding tube to get his weight up, it will come back out right. Then she would interject her sad stories of her sick, dying babies and her rapey abuse of pain. After hearing this for the 10th time in just a few hours, and I forgot to mention my 2-year-old, who repeats everything, was in the room, and she has since picked up the word rape, I broke down and cried. I ugly cried while holding my newborn to my chest, and my daughter cuddled at my side. My mom looked at me, then wept a non-existent tear and said, I looked just like that, crying just like that, when I held my babies for the last time. I finally flipped mid-tears, screamed at her to stop making it about her, that not everyone wants to hear her abuse stories on repeat for hours, that my baby, her grandson, was the sick babies, and hearing how her sick babies died was not only not being supportive, it was being cruelly insensitive. She looked at the nurse and blamed my outburst on my hormones, then laughed. But Nurse of the Year immediately fired back and told her to sit down, shut up, and show concern over her daughter and grandson before she had her removed from the hospital. My mom tried once more to get sympathy and attention. When the pediatrician came back in, he too cut her off, apologized somewhat for her previous misfortunes, but made it clear that her babies were not his patients. She left shortly after, and besides dropping my daughter off back home a few days later, she has refused to come over since, as I ganged up against her. Sweet, quiet relief. This next one is entitled, It calls me racist when I don't let him into a no-entry room and aggressively grabs at my chest for my tag to get in himself. Okay, first up, the formatting may be weird because I'm mobile, also tour at end. Anyways, so it entitled Dad is King. Today was an opening evening for parents at school, and for some reference, I go to a grammar school, so it gets quite busy on these days, and many students often to get asked to help out, which included today. I got asked to take round at Ancona to a round school, which would take 2 hours if I took the allocated route. The school is really big. When I was about to take them round, he said that he only had 15 minutes spare and asked me if I could take him around in that time. I told him that I would not be able to take him to many places. We eventually narrowed it down to the bottom floor of the main school building, though he got really annoyed and impatient that we couldn't explore more than that in 15 minutes. Anyways, so we got through most of the bottom floor until we reached the end of a corridor. At the end of this was the entrance to the art section. However, there were exams going on in there, and it was strictly forbidden for students, especially the parents going round the open evening, to go in there, in case of disrupting people doing their exams. It asked me if I could go through there, and I politely said that we couldn't. Then he suddenly got really mad, saying, "There's other people in there. You're not letting me in because I've got darker skin than you. All you white people are so fucking racist." It was a Jian, not much darker than me anyways. I'm 25 English, 25 German, 50 Bangladesh, so I had a slightly tan complexion, but it would be easy to mistake me for being of white ethnicity. I kept as calm as possible and politely explained, "I am sorry that you feel like that. I have no prejudice against anybody based on their natural appearance. Please do not make such assumptions. I would feel inclined to say that you slightly resist yourself, speaking about white people as a collective and grouping us all into this negative category that doesn't fit all of us. And please do not scream profanities at me either. If I went into the art block, I would get a detention. There's cameras covering every inch of this building. It clearly says no entry to students or visitors on the door, and newsflash, I'm a student and you're a visitor." His face creases up in rage and replies with, "Excuse me, do not speak to me with such disrespect. I am older than you, which means you must listen to me. There are so many people in there. I want to see the world-famous paintings and artwork that is up there, and my daughter loves art. Why can't you make an exception? You fucking retard, who even raised you? You so impolite, and can't even let parents in on opening day. What sort of bullshit is this?" Before I could say anything, he swiftly grabbed from my lanyard at my chest the thing you use to tag doors, which unlocks them, and unlocked the door. I don't think it was his intention to touch me in the manner that he did, but I'm extremely well developed for 14, and it hurt really bad. I also have a really long history of rape and sexual harassment, and this triggered my trauma. I kinda just fell to the floor and started crying uncontrollably because old memories came back. It heard me sobbing and turned around, looking at me funny. The teachers got alerted when the art door opened because the bell rings and came over. It probably looked like me, punched me to the floor the way I was sat. My favorite teacher took me into her classroom and asked what was up, and I told her, "I'm not extremely sure what happened to him. Guessing he probably just got kicked out the school grounds or something." Pillar open evening at school. Ed insists on going through the art block, but I say he isn't allowed to because of exams. He says I'm not letting him because he has darker skin than. He then goes on to aggressively grab at my chest for my tag and gets in himself. It triggered my test, and I started crying a lot because I have a long history of rape and sexual harassment. Update: the school contacted my parents and asked me if I wanted to take any legal action. We were already tied up in this other legal business with some dodgy person living in my dad's rental house for free and couldn't be bothered to press charges, so we didn't. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, smash the bell, and whatever else our YouTube overlords require nowadays.